The fear of failure is one of the most ridiculous things in the world. I even went back through my life and I was like, at what point did I decide that failing was the worst thing in the world?
I used to be the monomaniac. I would find the thing and go proverbial balls deep on the thing all the time.
I am very much a rabbit hole kind of person. When I find something that captures me, I don't stop until really I've come out the other side of the earth.
Why be afraid? If you're clearly aware that you are 1 corner, 2 corners, 3 corners away from inhabiting that space that you've defined as successful, what's the fear?
Everybody, and welcome to episode 14 of Writing Prose. I'm, of course, Shae the Red with our amazing panel. We got Cyborg Valkyrie.
Hi.
Hey.
We got Eric Canete.
Hello.
And we have Mr. MK Gibson. How's it going,
Hey, everybody,
Gibby?
how you doing? Good, how are you?
It's the fucking hi. Every time.
Hi.
All right,
Trademark at
so...
this point.
It is. That's the only reason I keep doing it. The only reason. Hold on. I've got a better one that kind of, it's a tie-in. Hey.
Oh my gosh.
The Fonz.
Exactly.
All right, so for the audience, we're in a little
Don't
GM
do this
group.
for the audience.
We're in a GM group together, and we constantly are trying to figure out like what our next topic should be, what the next thing we should bring to Writing Prose is, and this one actually kind of came entirely out of the blue, and is something that we found out that all of us have really different insight on, which is kind of cool. So we were talking about how to find your passion, and kind of that work-life balance, keeping it from going into full-blown obsession, or should it go into obsession, and all of that.
As it should.
As it should. Eric's like, what's this balance you speak of? There's no need for balance.
I think when Eric talks about going into obsession, I think he's looking at the particular example he gave of obsession, of
you're gonna show it, aren't
finding
you?
your passion and going into it. But
Wow.
yeah, am I gonna? No, we can't share screen on this. It fucks up the format.
Okay.
Needless to say,
Shae gets angry.
there was a visual prompt.
All right, now we have to explain it. Eric, you want to go ahead and explain what?
Yeah, lead it
kinda
off,
kicked
buddy. You
this
started
off?
this.
Yeah. There is a CrossFit athlete by the name of Sarah Sin's daughter, who I appreciated back when she was in the high competitive range. Not so much these days, because that level of performance dramatically falls off the longer that you stay in it. But back when she was like top 5, top 3, she was phenomenal. And I took a lot of inspiration from her dedication to her sport, to the point where I actually drew her when I was cross-bending a lot of these Avengers Avengers characters. I drew her as Thor. So fast forward from then, which is easily like 5 years later, she finally found it on Instagram and she commented on it. I kind of geeked out over it. I was like, hey, this is really, really cool. And I showed it to our private chat, and that's what started the conversation.
Yeah, so obviously, because we were talking about, and I know Gib jumped in here because you've got a lot of your own kind of feelings and hangups with some of what was in your past, as far as working out and the addiction that comes along with the endorphins and the skinny and the everyone thinks I'm pretty kind of thing. Which
I went the opposite route, because if I don't work out, I'm a what am I? I'm a ugly fugmo that like doesn't deserve love, and don't look at me. I'm gaining fat the longer I'm sitting here. Yeah. So.
Yeah, so that really kind of jumped us off into first off, how do you find your passion? And then when you find it, how do you keep it from becoming a consuming obsession, which actually has you
that thin line between
have a
passion
negative
and obsession.
effect?
Yeah.
I think I'm going to be the very wrong person to be on this panel, because when I am very much a rabbit hole kind of person. When I find something that captures me, I don't stop until really I've come out the other side of the earth. Not even at like the molten core. I just keep going. And I've been that way my entire life.
I can relate, Si.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's really interesting because I think that this is one of the times where Si and Eric are really close on the same page, and Gib and I are on the same page. Like, one of the things that I know that Eric brought up was talking about your wife and how she has like such a vast array of interests, and
It's kind of gross.
that's me. That's what I do. So it's actually really hilarious that we're talking about this right now, because I've been looking at various like painting projects and stuff that I have, and I think right now is probably where I am the most sporadic in what I'm painting, because I've got a painting that I already did on canvas. I went and got it printed up on smaller canvases, covered them with modeling paste, and then I'm going to go in and alter the reality within the modeling paste of the paintings. But I have 4 of those waiting for me to do. I spray painted 2 skateboard decks that I'm waiting to paint. I have 2 of these Rubik's cubes that I'm waiting to paint up. I've hit an area where I'm like, I really like painting and I want to expand on what that's gonna look like. Like I have at my Amazon wish list, I've got 2 pairs of leather shoes and a case of Angel's paints waiting for me to buy. Because I'm like, yes, I also want to custom my own shoes and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, I don't.
No obsession there.
No, so I have a hard time. Like when I find something I really like, I have a hard time just painting on canvas every time, because I start to feel less creative. It feels like the same old, and it gets really difficult to like, okay, I'm going to sit with yet another canvas and I'm going to try and do something different this time. Even the stuff that I've previously sold. Like I had a girl that I covered in modeling paste to make her look like she was molten rock, and then ran L-wire through the cracks. Because I like mixed media. I like doing things different. And so that's kind of where I go every time I find something that I like. I expand on it until I have 50 projects started and I finish none of them.
Oh.
I'm terrible. I'm sorry. Gib, what about you? How do you temper the passion?
Well, that's the problem. Is like I used to be the monomaniac. I would find the thing and go proverbial balls deep on the thing all the time. And I couldn't stop. If I became obsessed with a book series, I have to like just digest and destroy.
Yes.
So a movie series, a game series,
Yes.
something.
Yes.
But when I got into like when I was really into like, for example, like when I do art, I like back on the day, like I would get like, when you get a big box, like a refrigerator or something like that, like the big cardboard box. Like a 6-foot piece of cardboard turns into my canvas, because I would get chalks and inks and do this thing, and like I'd spend hours and hours and days and working. But there comes a point where I stopped and took a breath to see how much time had passed, and like I love what I do. But I also realize what are the things that I'm not doing because I'm so solely focused on this one thing. And I come from a long line of dilettantes. Like my grandfather was like a horseback rider. He flew biplanes. He was an engineer. And I have that I need to do many things at once kind of gene. So when I become so obsessed with something, I have to make sure I'm not becoming my passion is not being replaced by obsession. So and I also, when I start watching people, I think we all knew people in the day that like they dressed a certain way, like they're a part of the skateboarding crowd, because if they're not, what are they? Or are they part of this crowd? If they're not this, then what are they? And if your passion or your hobby defines you solely as a person, I find that anathema, because I need to try many things. I can't just do that one thing, because I'm afraid of being limited and putting it into a box.
I think I'm really similar. I think I'm very similar, because I have such disdain for people who try to boil me down to like a singular thing.
Right, because that's not what human beings are.
No.
Human beings are multifaceted things. And
exactly.
When Eric put up the individual that CrossFit, she was beautiful and she was fit and she clearly was dedicated to her craft, and it clearly showed. And I thought that is wonderful. On the flip side, how much life was spent doing the reps and the work, because it feels good and it's great, but how many dinners did you miss? How many date nights did you miss? How many, those type of things.
If we paint it with that sort of like color, Gib, I totally get where you're coming from, but it doesn't take it. But somehow it takes away from the idea that she was aware that those are the things that she had to surrender. Right.
100%.
So I think one of the things I wanted to highlight in that conversation was that rare have I seen or come across or read interviews of or met people at that high three percentile of whatever it is that they're into who don't surrender those kinds of things. But rare are they ever like, oh, I didn't know I had to give that up. You know what I mean? They were clear, like, I need to give up, hangouts. I need to give up my free time. I need to give up my whatever, because I really, really, really want to be the best at this thing, right? So in as far as like I'm with you guys when it comes to like finding that sort of, first of all, just as a concept, I do believe that people are more than just the one thing. I was primarily speaking about the exceptional people that inhabit that rarefied air of like, those people are notable. They are who they are because they have, this isn't the wrong word, but like they have abandoned the kinds of stuff that we're talking about right now and willfully do so,
When I see people who are truly exceptional, I mean, like truly exceptional about whatever that craft happens to be, sometimes they were born to do this thing. Like their brain is just hot-wired to like, they were meant to do this. Yep. And then you would say something like, take like Amadeus. People say, well, the brain was different. Like, well, Amadeus was also trained from like childhood to like play piano every day, all day, every day. Yep. He was built to be this thing, but he also had a level of genius to create the music that he created. And like you will always have people who play every day all the time who will never reach that level because they just, there's a certain part of the brain that just cannot reach that next plateau because they weren't built to do that thing. And I guess I'm always fascinated by people who have a better work ethic than me. I love what I do. I love writing, and it is my passion. But when I start becoming obsessed with something I like, I literally can hear my son in the other room wanting my attention. Sure. And there's that whole cats in the cradle starts kicking in. So when you actually have things in your life that or have equal value to you, that's when I think it's just, when I was younger, I was way more passionate and I did more things like a monomaniac. As I've gotten older, I have to temper that.
Yes.
When you're young, you're allowed to.
I agree with that.
There's a reason I get up so early to get work done, so that like by the time the family wakes up, I've been busy for the last 3 hours.
I agree. Yep.
So here's another aspect of this, though, right? So we're talking about what this woman had to go through in order to be the top of her field. But correct me if I'm wrong, Eric. She didn't have a 9-to-5. That was her 9-to-5.
100%. Yeah.
Okay, and so if you are getting paid to do something you are passionate about, like if she was going through and she was spending the amount of time that she had to spend to get good at her craft, working in an office, nobody would bat an eye. Because everyone would say, well, obviously you're working to provide for your family. That's what you're supposed to do. So it's only when somebody has a passion that is lucrative enough for them to live off of that it makes people kind of look at it in that light. Because I worked 60 hours a week. I had zero social life. I did not hang out with friends. I didn't go to parties. I didn't go to movies. I didn't play video games. I worked, and then I worked, and then I slept. That was all that I did. For a very long, in fact, technically I had 3 jobs because I was working on building Red Valkyrie. So I would work for the military, and then I would work for the cleaning company, and then I would work on whatever time off I had from that second cleaning job. I would turn around and I would stream on Red Valkyrie, and then I'd sleep. That was my entire existence.
For sure. Yeah.
I think that when we're talking about finding your passion, it's when you wake up in that scenario and you go, I can't do this. Like, this cannot be all my life is. I have so much more that I want to give. I can't just go to a 9-to-5 and then go to a 5-to-9 and then back at it. Like, this can't be it.
Yeah, I don't think this conversation is about, like, here's the one true version of that, right? I think there's multiple roads to how to get you there. And this one in specific, and the ones that I consistently cite it's because in conversations with my wife, she's like, how do you draw all the time? Like, how do you, I go, well, first of all, it's my job and it allows me to do it. But even if I didn't have it, right, it was the thing that I did. It wasn't, I do my 9 to 5, right? And then I'd get up and draw, right? And then for fun, I draw, right? Because I'm singularly focused on how to get better at my craft. Now, this was to Gibbs' point, like earlier in my life, in my early 20s, I had all sorts of, dispensable time available to me, right? It was job, maybe hang out with a friend or two, maybe date when it would allow for it, but it would not supersede this thing that I wanted to do, which is get so good at my craft that I was undeniable at it, right? Mm-hmm. So I think both of those things, or everything that we're talking about, can exist, but just different phases are a lot more forgiving. To Gibbs' point, there's different phases in your life that are going to be so much more forgiving to this kind of obsession, right? There are instances, and I can relate 100%. I give myself X amount of time in this office, and as soon as 6 o'clock, 5:30 rolls around, my brain is already switching over to what's happening outside my door, because I do have those responsibilities. And that's why time becomes so much more precious to me. But again, in my early 20s, you can convince me there was anything else to do.
Yeah. Well, and it also comes back to, there was the one point that I had made where a lot of people are afraid to chase their actual passions.
Sure.
Because
I was actually wanted to follow up with you on that, where it's like, what is that? Why be afraid? If you're clearly, and I think I said it in our chat, if you're clearly aware that you are 1 corner, 2 corners, 3 corners away from being in that space, that's inhabiting that space that you've defined as successful, what's the fear?
Well, and so especially
the fear is that you're not good enough.
What? Really? You've gotten that far?
Oh, absolutely.
You're there.
Well, it's the imposter syndrome. Even when you get there, I mean, you're still like, do I really deserve to be here? And what is it going to take?
How long until they figure out that I snuck in?
Oh, what is it going to take for me to get knocked out of this sphere? So is
that what it is? Is that capture imposter syndrome, that the sentiment that side? Really?
It's at least part of it. So I would say a huge part of imposter syndrome is I have somehow fooled people into thinking I belong here, and sooner or later they're going to find out that I don't.
Wow.
So there's that part where you're constantly waiting for the hammer to drop, and I think the other part that a lot of people that keeps them from chasing their dreams, right, is because in order for you to follow a passion, you have to bet on yourself, which means that if it doesn't work, there is no one else to place that blame on but you, because it's your passion, it's your dream, it's your drive, and do you have the right connections, the right talent, the right amount of drive and time and dedication to put into this in order to have this become something lucrative. And a lot of people are so scared, because I can go and do, this is the evil that I know, right? I can go and do this 9 to 5 job every day, and I know that I can get a paycheck, and I know that paycheck is going to pay my bills. Exactly. This is the safe bet. Now, this is the evil I don't know.
Yeah.
I can try. I could be a phenomenal writer. I could pour my heart and soul into books, into comics, into art, and I could still fail because I'm not the best marketer. I'm not the best manager.
Yeah.
And
here's my attitude towards that, and I think that's all brilliant. But everything that you're premising on, like, oh, this might be negative, I'm premising as a positive, because I'm like, both of those things are in my control. It's when things are not in my control that I get annoyed, right? When I'm like, I have to sit here hat in hand and ask for like opportunity. Instead, I hear what you're saying, which is like, I can choose either one of those things. But one of those things brings me closer to the thing that I want, and the other thing brings me to something that leads me to like a level of comfort. It's now up to me to choose which one I'm sort of like okay with. So I think it's a weird safety mechanism in my head that I've developed to go like, I can go do this thing and it's going to be easy, or I can go do this thing and I possibly could fail at it. But unlike most people that are handed choices, they don't really care for. It's just what's available to them. In both of those scenarios, I get to choose, and that's phenomenal to me.
I think that's what separates Eric Canete, who has worked for Disney, who has a very successful comic.
We're going to knock that off, and we're going to turn that part off really quick.
That's what separates an Eric Canete from someone who dabbles.
Yes,
From someone who sits in their home office. Yeah.
What I was gonna say that I think is actually kind of really funny is it all comes down to your specific drive and your personality. So you have people that are a lot more timid in personality, where, or people who, you know, in previous relationships, I could never take the risks that I've been taking recently with art and cosplay because I didn't have the support behind me.
I agree. Yep.
So if I spent, you know, an afternoon working on a cosplay, but the lawn wasn't cut, then I failed because the lawn wasn't cut, and I was supposed to do that. And that's how it felt. But see, now in the situation I'm in now, where I can spend all of this time and it's like, okay, we realize that this is something we really like. How can we make this something that is sustainable, where you can still have the fun and still enjoy it, but it can also become something beneficial for us long term? Oh, well, what if we start filming when you start making stuff?
For sure.
And then that becomes content.
If I can if I can crawl up my own ass for a second.
Yeah.
You left.
It's your favorite place, right?
Yeah, without it. Oh.
It's your safe warm place.
No, it speaks to Shae's point and also helps to answer Eric's question as to why not do these things, and stick with me and save all questions to the end. Okay. We're taught that you will fail from childhood. You are taught you will fail the test if you don't study every day in school. If you don't study, you're not going to pass the test. You are taught on the sports team, if you don't practice, you will fail. You are taught that society does not care for you. And that if you don't work hard, like the Protestant work ethic, if you don't work hard and save your money, you're going to fail. And failure. And it's not just personal failure. You're taught societally you're going to fail if you don't. Now, how do you study for a test that you don't know where the text manual is? How do I become a writer? Where's my guide? Where's my teacher? In school, they provide you one. You go to a job, you're provided a training manual or a trainer. You're provided these things. Trying to find that first step to put yourself into a position where you can start to study for the test. But I like martial arts. If you you can't fight a black belt until you've spent the last 10 years going from white belt on up before you even consider stepping into the ring with this other person.
You can. It's just going to be very funny.
Right. You're taught you're going to fail. Like our society, I won't speak to the world, but I will definitely speak to American society, whether they realize it or not. You're taught you're going to fail from the very beginning, And, as a child, you learn to walk, but you fall down, but you get back up. You're taught to overcome. Instinctually, we know to overcome. Mankind is the one thing we're great at is overcoming. Like, necessity is not the mother of invention. It's being pissed off. I can't get over there, so I'm going to build a fucking bridge, And that anger, that drive is what pushes us forward. There are those of us whose brains say, no, I don't give a shit. I'm going to make that step. However, those are the exceptions and not the rule. The successes are not a pathway because it's not a tech manual. It's not a step-by-step. Because Eric Canete knows how to draw very well and his medium moved from being realistic to stylistic to this beautiful work that I see you put up on Twitter constantly. Let's rewind back 20 plus years ago, like your art then to art now. It's a constant progression. But telling somebody unfortunately, there's no way from point A to Z. There's a lot of steps in between. And that is the fear. The absence of knowledge equals fear.
So here's the part where I want to add to what you're talking about when you say society teaches us to fail, at least in the early parts, right? It teaches you that fear of failure. What it sets up in front of you, especially for school, when it comes to traditional schooling, is that they give you the answer to not how to fail, right? Where failure really hurts is when you're not given that answer. So if you go through any sort of elementary, high school curriculum, they're like, if you don't study for this, you're going to fail. So here's the things that you need to study. You're given the tools in order to succeed. So some people, again, depending on the personality, right, stops at the water's edge of that message, which is you're going to fail. They don't hear the other part, which is like, and here's how you succeed, right? So the part that the muscle that I encourage people to sort of like consistently develop after that sort of here are the answers is to go and find a way to develop those answers for yourself. The other part is, especially once you get out into the real world, there is in a creative field, there is no Z, right? There's only A to whatever that end goal is. You get to help define what Z looks like for you. Say again?
I said A to squiggly mark.
Yeah. To me, you get to define.
World. There is no logical end.
That's
to
it. I think like my wife constantly says this. She goes like, "How do I get that good?" Like she'll point to somebody like, "How do I get to be this particular artist that she really likes or she really is drawn to?" And I say, I'm like, well, that person, the art that you're looking at right now is coming out of a person who's like 60 some odd, 70 some odd years old. You are in your early 30s, late 20s, whenever it is she made that reference. I'm like, there's like lifetime worth of learning to where you are now and where they are, for you to say like, hey, I'm ready to ingest that level of success. I don't believe that you are, and that took a lot of work to get there. So the end goal is always identify, at least for me, once it's not being given to me on a silver platter, is to identify and compartmentalize what good looks like. I'm not good at 50 things. Let me start at step 1 and 2. Let me go get good at those 2 things. And I think that's why things like writing, as quote unquote scary it is for me, establishing what good looks like as far as gains that I can make into this space is right now is everything is mechanical. Everything is like, oh, if he does this, then this is the appropriate reaction. Here are the themes, and can I land that? I'll start doing the stuff that you're referring to, Gib, where I don't care about anatomy anymore, much, much later. But I know it's a very long road between now and that proverbial Z, right?
Well, I think a lot of people also, the fear of failure, to me, is one of the most ridiculous things in the world. And this is coming from someone who has been crippled for years by being terrified of failing. And I even went back through my life and I was like, at what point did I decide that failing was the worst thing in the world?
Wow,
and
that must have been so profound.
I can't even pinpoint when it was, because I didn't have parents that were like, if you don't have straight A's, like you're grounded. Like my parents, I had a teacher who made me call my mother at work because I was in danger of getting a C because I had missed turning in some homework. I was in tears, entirely distraught. Called my mom at work. My mom asked to speak to my teacher and then chewed my teacher out for A, making me an emotional wreck over a grade that doesn't fucking matter in 4th grade. And B, disturbing her at work to then traumatize her daughter into saying I might get a C. She's like, a C is fucking average, okay? Let her get an average score. I don't care. And you know what? I got an A-. So all of that stress and all of that mental torment that I had in 4th grade, I think is when it really got hammered into me that if I fail, I am not worthy of anything. I'm not worthy of love, of admiration, of anything positive. I am the worst thing in the world.
So do you think that pivoted you? Well, first of all, it sounds like it built that mechanism inside of you as far as feeling failure. So did that then sort of did that inform the level of investment that you wanted to, the level of investment that you needed to put in when it comes to your creativity?
I didn't want to put into anything that I was scared that I was going to potentially fail at. So I would write, but only for me, and no one else could read it. I have people telling me, in fact, I just had somebody say this a couple days ago. They said, you have no business progressing as quickly as you have with painting, based on the amount of time you've spent painting. And I was like, you don't understand. Painting has always been a passion. I just have never dabbled in it. I watch so many tutorials on how to do this, on how to blend, on all of this. The things that are holding me back is mostly motor skill because I haven't spent the time to do it. I understand anatomy and putting things together and shading and things like that, but I lack the motor skill to implement it. And it's because I was so terrified. I was like, I'm never going to be a great painter, so I don't want to fail, so I'm just not going to paint. And I didn't for so long.
I have something to add.
Go.
So, tying into that, here's another kind of little aspect, a little facet of it. Getting told that you have so much potential, especially at a young age. So for me, it started about the second grade. Because I test extraordinarily well, like 99th percentile through most of my schooling. So that being said, being told you have all this potential, it then ties into, okay, well, you're not fulfilling your potential.
Yes.
Right? And so then it becomes, do you try? And then you have that fear inside of you, well, what if the potential is fake? You know what I mean? What if I go as high as I can go and people are like, wow, I expected better. So then does it become less painful to not try and just have that unfulfilled potential than it is to shoot for the moon and miss?
Oh, wow. This is deep.
So yeah, that's kind of where
I was the opposite way
since I was in the second grade.
I tested well on third grade. One of my teachers wanted me tested to see if I was special needs, because I was the kid that would do the homework but then never turn it in. I put stuff in the back of my desk. On more than one occasion, she would come over and grab my desk and flip it over and dump it on my lap. All the entire desk contents onto the floor, all the books and papers. Read through it and find the one sheet and slap it in your face about, here's where it was at the whole time, and then go away. And they called my parents and blah, blah, blah. And it was the whole thing. So they had me tested. And the test came back like, oh no, his IQ is actually pretty high. He's just, he's just not a good student. I'd never test well. Anxiety, it was one of those, and they actually put me in the talented and gifted program, not for here's the thing, but I wasn't talented and gifted anything in academics. I was strictly B material. But when it came to the creativity aspect, I was off the charts. And they were like, so you're not academically, okay, student. That's a B when he applies himself, but creatively. But then, so I was told, you're very creative. You're very creative. That's fantastic. But then you meet other people who are actually practicing creative, who are better artists, better musicians, better whatever. And then you're just like Cy was saying, I'm like, well, fuck, if they're already this good and with no formal training, they're already natural, and I have to work very hard at it to be average. Why try? And but then I always wanted to get into writing, and the stepdad's you can't do that, and you don't just become a writer. People don't do, and don't even bother trying. You just get a job, get a 9-to-5, get a blue collar job, and shut up. And so at 16, I decided to after some other personal issues, I just said, everything that makes me scared, I'm going to do it. And so I was never a big dude. Awesome. So like when I was a kid, I was kind of small, and then I started getting taller. So I was tall and skinny. I'm gonna play football. Never played it, and I started playing football my sophomore and my junior year, and then I didn't my senior year because I wanted to focus on academics. But if something scared me, if roller coaster scared me, I've got to get on it. Skateboarding, I've got to try it. Bungee jumping, I got to do it.
That's so hilarious because I'm the same way with fears in that sense. I will get on the biggest roller coaster, the biggest slide, whatever.
And I hate fear because it's because part of you's always afraid. Part of you's always afraid of failure. Part of you's always afraid of something. And if you don't have fear, then you're kind of foolish because fear keeps you alive. But I had to start throwing myself at things that specifically made me afraid. So when it came time when I was reaching the end of my military career, and I'd never done the writing thing. I've read bajillion books, and I wanted to write. And I've always kind of wrote some poetry or wrote some short stories or wrote little things, nothing I actually was proud of. And I'm like, that's it. Fuck it. I'm going to try, and as I started putting my effort into it. Now where I'm at several years later after I retired and I'm actually writing full time, I've gone back to book one and I've re-edited it. And man, I have learned a lot since then because this is kind of rough. But when you are passionate about something, you will start picking it up. And like Shae says, you don't have the motor skills or the buttonology or literally just the muscle memory to do the thing. But it's up there because you were paying attention because you cared, and practice. You'll start jumping by leaps and bounds, but you do have to commit.
Yes. And I think that's I think that one of the biggest reasons that people who are incredibly passionate about something don't progress is because they don't dedicate the time. And it's hard. It's really hard when in my head, I know exactly what I need to do like logically what needs to happen for this to look from this to this, but physically I just can't seem to get there. And I stare at it and I'm like, I know what it's supposed to look like and it isn't this, and why doesn't it look like this? And then it's like, well, let's see, you've studied like the academic side of this for the past 2 decades, but you've actually practiced it about 6 months total in the past 2 years. That's why you can't do it. And it's like, oh, so I probably just need to paint more and I need to practice more, and then I might actually. And that's why when I started and people were like, yeah, you're doing okay, because look, figure drawing and faces I'm terrible at. Like, it's trying to get the nice soft sculpt of a woman's face is really, really hard, because one errant line and she goes from like beautiful young 20 something to like ancient hag, and it's really easy to do. And so that's what people saw, and they were like, oh, she's trying and that's good and she should keep trying. And then all of a sudden I whip out like a piece when I'm really emotional, or I paint Cthulhu and I've got like water spray and everything, and people are like, what the fuck, where did this come from? I'm like, oh no, I'm bad with human form. That's why I was practicing it, because I suck at humans. But like, dude, you want me to do like some monsters, some beasts, some like totally loose shit that I can make up on the fly? Like, I actually can do a lot of that, because it doesn't have a specific like rule set and pattern for us to make it look right.
Only because it's tangentially related. San Diego Comic-Con just happened. There's a lot of trailers came out and things like that. And did you see the new trailer for the She-Hulk television show?
No, I did not.
Okay. Hulk looks good because you can we as a society don't have an issue with deforming a man, a masculine form, to make it kind of
no problem.
But she still looks like a PlayStation 2 because they're afraid to keep her pretty and smooth. They can't. It's the uncanny valley is there, and it's the CGI. Like, there's a notice, like when she's next to the Hulk, she looks fake next to him, and he's a CGI character. So and it's only because it's that kind of thing. Like, we're afraid to like not give a woman a crow's feet or a laugh line or a wrinkle or something, because it's like, oh, now she's not pretty, or now she's not has character. She doesn't have a hawk nose, or she doesn't have like a droopy eye. But people do, and they.
It's a really funny double-edged sword when it comes to that kind of stuff. And I honestly, like, I see people, I'm a lot like Eric's wife. I see people who do these amazing, intricate, like, female pieces of art, and I'm like, I want to do that. And then I start drawing it, and I'm like, not like that, I don't. Like, she's wall-eyed and looking in 2 different directions, and that forehead, man. Like,
in that case,
like, nope,
the case that Gib is talking about, I think, like, because I think the tolerances for her being so, like, I don't know, the personification of pretty or the personification of powerful woman. It's like, yeah, of course, because she's a power fantasy. Rare do I ever go into a situation where I'm like, that's the only woman body type, In this particular field, especially when it comes to She-Hulk, especially because there's a preconceived notion of how she should look. I think that's the reason why the tolerances for her looking the way she does is so narrow. Now, in as far as execution is concerned, I 100%. Looks totally CG. Like this, I've seen them do better than that, and as a matter of fact, it's because that they did it. Now they've established the bar for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that the other problem that I have specifically when you're talking She-Hulk is people have such a hard time understanding like taller, muscular, like broad-chested women as a body type. Mm-hmm. Because they either give them 2% body fat and make them all look like they're roided out with like a pretty face, which just looks weird. Like, weird as fuck weird. Or they can't fathom sizing people up, and they don't look at references like, they'll look at references like Scandinavians, right? But the problem is when you look at Scandinavian women in Scandinavian countries, they're the majority, the tall women, which means they're surrounded by other tall women that are broad-chested, that are more muscular. And so they all look a very similar way. But when you take one of those women and you put them in like England, the differences are drastic, and they have like, because that looks wrong. I have pictures of me, right, with smaller girls, and I look photoshopped. And it's just it's just a straight up picture. I look like I am photoshopped. Like I can't possibly exist next to these petite women, because out of all of it, I'm the one that looks out of place. And so because somebody will draw something like that, it'll look out of place, and then they go, oh, I have to change it because it doesn't look right. It's like, no, that's how it actually would look. Like, go next time I'm at a con, y'all, let's get all the short girls together and take a fucking photo. I will look like somebody took me and just whoop sized me up, because I've got the same basic proportions, but I'm gigantic in comparison to these other women. And because of that, it's really hard, I think, for people to get the good perspective and to actually represent tall women appropriately. Because we look like behemoths in society, and that's just how we look. So there was one other point, unless, Sai, do you want to say what you were just saying?
Do you want me to say what I was just saying?
Yes.
Okay. Well, to kind of tie into the whole, you have to put in the work. The other thing that people like to use to discourage themselves, is that when they're really interested in doing something, when they've let's take drawing for example, because it's something that because it's something that I really am interested in doing, but that I was never the one in the family to have the proclivity to do it. You start to do it. You try to do it, and you see that your efforts are, let's just say, bad.
You're not instantly fantastic.
Yeah, well, I'm getting there. So you try to do it, right? And you do it, and to say that it looks like complete ass is probably underselling it, the level of shitty. So you do that, and rather than acknowledge the fact that, okay, you've gone into this with an appreciation and maybe some ideas of the techniques and stuff like that, like Shae was saying about having looked at it for years, but you have none of the actual hands-on technique to be able to apply what you want to put on the page, to translate that to your arm movement, how you're gripping your pencil and all this kind of stuff. You have none of those fundamentals. You just you have the idea of what you want to put there, and so you try. It looks like shit, and then you convince yourself, well, if I had any talent, if I had any gift, if I had that kind of divine touch of I'm going to be great at this, there should be some reflection of that the first time I touch a pencil to paper.
Yeah.
And so you convince yourself that the fact that this looked like shit, my first time out of the gate with no training whatsoever, the fact that this looks like shit means that I'm not meant to do this. Put the pencil down, put the pad away, and just never pick it up again.
See, and that's the it makes me giggle, because I've seen literally how much Sai has progressed in a day.
There it is.
Like, we sat down when I was down in Florida, and Sai drew one thing, and it was like, okay. And then they were like, I actually really do kind of want to work on drawing. And I was like, cool. So we go to Michael's and we get them the right tools, because that's another thing a lot of people don't seem to understand is you have to have the right tools in order for you to be able to produce the things that you want to produce. If all you have is a mechanical pencil, shading is going to be really difficult.
I started with a number 2 pencil and a 3x5 notepad. Not even 3x5, a little notepad.
One of the little steno pads.
Yeah.
And that was the thing, is we went and we got Sai, okay, let's get you blenders, let's get you variety of lead, softness and all of that, and an actual drawing pad, and let's go. And Sai went from something that was really basic and rudimentary to something that was actually really a huge improvement in an incredibly short amount of time, where, hey, now I have to pay attention to like eye spacing and mouth, position and all that kind of stuff. And that was in an afternoon. and it's, you know, still Cy's like, yeah, but it didn't look perfect. And it's like, well, it's not going to. You just started. But it's hard. It's easy to say that to someone else. When it's you, it's really hard to be like,
yep.
It's okay that it isn't perfect. You just started, and you're like, everything in me wants to run.
Yeah, forgive me for sort of like chuckling at the idea of perfect. The thing when I hear people say that is perfection the goal, right? If it shifts into perfection, I'm like, okay, we're gonna need to go define what that means, because I have no idea, and that's incredibly subjective. But to your point, if your gain in one day was so substantial and notable, I think that's the goal. Right?
Exactly.
Like if you're paying attention to like, okay, maybe it's not perfection. Maybe it's like, I didn't know how to do this. Oh, it's a tools concept. Okay, great. Let me go get in the approachable space by giving myself the right tools. Now can I do it? And if you can do it, I'm like, okay, one off the list. Right? And I believe it has to be, especially art. And that's why, like, what was it, 2 weeks ago, I was so like, I could teach you guys how to draw, right?
Yeah.
It's because we can make it that level of systematic. It's not, it's only foreign if you put it under the umbrella of like ideal perfection, because that's a huge bucket and it's filled with many gazillion other buckets. But if we sit here and go like, not even fundamentals, to just go like, oh, here's what you can draw. You're already ahead of the curve, where you don't have to worry about like, twisting around a flower bag like Disney would. Okay, we'll play up to your strengths and we'll build on top of that. That is amazing. That is amazing, and that should never get lost.
That's really funny that Shae attributes it to the tools, because being the person on the other side of that, 10-15% of that was the tools. Don't get me wrong, they did help. But 85 to 90% of that was having Shae sitting next to me.
That's awesome.
Talking to me while I did it.
And let me say something about that too, which is like, you perfectly captured it. Sorry, so I'm going to say it with more words. But it's like, so I think you identified as like, sub 20% of the tools. And sometimes you just can't get that stippling effect unless you have that particular pen. You might not be able to get the shading because, to Shae's point, you have a mechanical pencil, right? So you go get the thing and it gets you closer. What I think she instilled in you, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is not just the support, but also by proxy, the confidence. And some people just don't have the confidence to go like, I'll take it to this next level. And you have to, and that one, because it's so subjective to each individual, you have to train yourself for that. Me personally, I trained myself into thinking that I, like at 17, not because it was stood up by any sort of evidence, but I just fooled myself thinking I was good. And somehow that translated into a career. I had to like bullshit my way. I remember you guys making a point earlier of like, hey, you have all of these points of reference in a space, and be like, gosh, if they're this good, then what's the point of continuing, right? I bullshitted my way into thinking. I lied to myself multiple times to say like, oh yeah, no, I'm just as good as these people. But if I could time travel my way, like if I could flux capacitor my way back into my professional space, I'm like, you really suck. But now, knowing me, I know why I did that, is so that I didn't have to deal with the emotional space that you guys were talking about. Yeah. Because if I really took the time to be reflective, I'd have probably talked myself out of it. Instead, I went into the bullshit route, which is like, yeah, I'm here for a reason. My shit doesn't stink and blah, blah, blah. But I swear to you, in context to my 40-year-old space versus my 20-year-old space, I'm like, you fucking stupid kid. You really need to pay attention to everybody around you and get good at your job.
When you say something like that, I start laughing to myself, because when someone tells me, oh, I like your books, I'm like, what bad books have you read that you think mine are good, you fucking idiot? Like
self-deprecation is the best coping mechanism.
But it is that scenario that it's believe in your own talents, believe in your own progression. Yeah. And there's that healthy, passion, be a little obsessed, be a lot obsessed, but be obsessed with, out here, you know what you should be obsessed with? Yourself. Not in a narcissistic way, but be obsessed with your self-betterment. You are never done growing. Yep. You are never done learning. And when you are, you're just done.
You're just waiting to die.
Like when I was a young man, like I used to believe that I had superpowers. Like one of my most favorite like Marvel creations was the Taskmaster, because when I see somebody do something, I can mimic it 80% of the way just by watching someone else do it. If you show me like, here's how you cut something, I can cut it. Whether it was carpentry, plumbing, I did a lot of little blue collar jobs, but show me once and I can do it. Sometimes twice, but as long as I see it, I can copy you 80% of the time. When someone would draw, that's how I learned to draw, just watching someone else's hands do the motion. I watched for a lot of videos on like how to draw. Like there was this old like VHS set that I had worn a million times. It was Stan Lee standing over the shoulders of like Liefeld, Jim Lee, McFarland, and I want to say Wallace Portacio.
You're right.
But it was and it was watching them draw, and I learned to draw by watching their hands move. Like, oh, that's how you space things out, and so that's how you.
You are the Taskmaster.
But I need to see your hand move. What's that?
You are the Taskmaster.
Oh, but there's no one to show. Like, here's how you write, and I'm like, shit. There's no one to like show. Like, you can read it, but you don't see how the sausage is made. So if I can visually see somebody do something, I can mimic it. But that's a skill that you can't. I can sit over your shoulder and watch your fingers click the keyboard, but that doesn't mean it teaches you how to write. So
yeah, you don't know the thought process that goes behind it,
right?
How the wheels turn,
and this editing and the self. Because some people write. When I talk to other authors, they write not first draft syndrome, but they write so slow that their first draft is 80% done, because they'll put like one line and think about it, one line then think about it. And then there's people like me who just throw like shit at the wall and they start scraping it away, because that's the kind of art style. It's like, well, I'm just going to throw a bunch of vomit up, and then the second pass I'll make it prettier. And it just depends on what feels comfortable for you. So you just have to find your style and try it. But also don't be afraid to try other styles, because you will eventually find your balance.
Well, and that gets back to one of the things that I was making a point of, is there should be zero fear of failing. Because it's only a failure. The only time something is truly a failure is if you refuse to learn anything from it. So if you go through all of the pain and torment of trying to do something, it doesn't work out, and you walk away with absolutely nothing from that event, then you're right, you failed. But if you walked away going, okay, this is something that I like, this is something I don't like, this is something I can improve on, this is somewhere that I'm lacking, then it's not a failure. That's a growth opportunity. And it's a matter of you sitting down and saying, okay, I am not perfect, because nobody is, and where can I get better at this? And here are the areas.
Can I add to that, Shae? I think there's a point in this conversation that it's so relatable to me, because I have it with my wife all the time. And the addition that I the fear of failure, the fear of not being good enough, the fear of not living up to sort of like the picture in your head, right? The thing that I say to her is that even in failure, there is nothing so catastrophic that we can't recover from, that you can't recover from, right? I think the reason why it's so scary for you is because you haven't learned how to recover from it yet.
Yeah.
Right. It's the how part that you like, well, how do I get better at this? Why did I fail? And then especially in art, like, I think people think that it's magical. It's not. It's incredibly rudimentary, right? It's pieces that are just slapped together, and those pieces in conjunction and in concert yield the effect that you're looking for. I don't know why people think it's so difficult. I think they make it seem like it's just weird alchemy. It's not. So to her, what she hasn't built up yet what she hasn't built up yet is the analysis process, right? So it becomes catastrophic for her. So she doesn't go like, oh, why did I mess up that skin tone? She doesn't go through like, is it color? Is it, you know what I mean? Is it like the way I blended it out?
Color, texture, is it the way I layered the color? Yeah.
Exactly. Is it the way the colors are playing off of each other? Did I choose the right skin tone but choose the wrong background color? And so now it's reading as more yellow than red. Is that what's going on? Like, that muscle, people don't know how to develop it and flex it. But as soon as you start going like, oh, that's actually not that bad, to your point, Shae, this is a learning opportunity for me, that you have to develop that. Again, nothing is so catastrophic where you're like, oh, this is unusable.
I have two things to say.
It's not that bad. It's just like that's that expression that's like, oof, whether it's after a piece of art, a food you cooked, or sex, it's not that bad. It's like, oh, yeah.
It's not that bad to put yourself through.
When it comes to sex, I'll take it.
Oh, damn it! That's horrible.
Well, like I have this running joke in a lot of my books. A lot of my characters say it, and I said it on many occasions. Like I practice really, really hard at something. If I end up being very average, I quit. I don't know why I keep fucking. So it's
Yeah, good point.
Si, what were you gonna say?
So 2 things. I think that more people need to learn that the path to developing a skill is not a pass-fail. And
Yeah.
I think so many people
Perfect.
look
It's a
at it.
gradient.
Yeah, so many people. Well, it is to learn. So there is no fail unless, like you said. But I as you were saying it, I'm realizing that each time I have set out to do something, to get better at something, I've looked at it not in terms of did I develop a new skill or hone something here. I've always looked at it as, did I achieve my goal? And my goal was always to make the thing. It was never to learn better how to make the thing. So there's that. And the thing that Shae is bullying me into saying from the private chat was to, again, harken back to 10-15 minutes ago, is that beyond tools, I think that having Shae there was about having solid encouragement and help.
Yes.
That having that true encouragement, not from somebody who was expecting something from you, not from someone who was like counting on you for something, but just someone there who was actually interested in watching you develop the skill, not for anything beyond their own enjoyment of it. That is so important, because so many times, and I'm gonna talk to the parents here. So many times, when you try to encourage your kids, there's always this tinge of self-serving that comes through, even to a child, because I remember in my young points in life, like maybe from 5 to 15, that entire span, I remember hearing encouragement, but it never quite rang true. It always had
It always
the tinge.
came with an expectation.
Yeah. The expectation, or the how is this going to serve me as the parent at some point in the future? That whole thing about my kid's going to be a doctor or a lawyer someday.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So tied up into all that, and that just expectation, and that you better live up to your potential. But having someone who you care about and who you trust and who you respect, sitting by you and helping you through that process, at kind of your pace and kind of on your terms, rather than like the nun cracking the ruler on your knuckles. I think that's so important, and that's why when you talked about teaching us how to draw, and how effective and maybe even in your mind simple that would be, although I have to disagree with you on that. That's why that actually delighted me, because I would love that.
Yeah.
I would love to have someone who, for no other reason than to pass on his set of skills to other people, willing to sit down and take that time, because you have people like Shae or I that might look at, okay, well, here's how to draw, and I've watched fucking hour-and-a-half streams of Jim Lee drawing shit, but to actually have an instructor who could look and tell me what I'm doing wrong,
Sure.
that's an investment that I've never been willing to make. Because well, I'm going to pay someone, X amount of money, something much more exorbitant than what I charge as an editor, to sit down with me for an hour when I don't even know if I really have this skill or that I could develop this skill.
Right.
Well, and not to mention, when you're paying someone to do something like teach you drawing, there's a twinge of, you're not necessarily invested in whether I'm getting good at this or not. You're invested in whether my check cleared. Like,
right. And you don't know if you're getting honest
paid,
feedback.
So
You're like, oh, you're doing great. I mean, really? This is a fucking stick figure.
Right.
Here's an aside in regards to, I think, why sometimes, if from an audience perspective, when somebody's teaching you, and I think it goes in line with what you're talking about, Sai, which is not all instructional stuff is plug and play. So when I say something like, oh, I think I'm pretty confident I can teach somebody to level up their craft, right? It's not contrasting it to what I do. And I think people get lost in that. That's where people are like, wait, I don't understand. And I think we talked about this either privately or anyway. My point is, like, whenever I'm giving my wife feedback, I don't give her feedback to the way I would give a concept artist feedback. And she took exception to that. Right? She was like, why wouldn't you tell me something that you wouldn't tell your coworkers? And I go like, okay, it's like akin it to like runners, people who run sprints and people who run marathons. If I give you feedback on how to like explode off the block so that you can get that first step, the first 2.5 steps ahead of your competitors in a sprint, that doesn't make sense to somebody who's running a marathon. Right? I cater that feedback to your skill set. Like I take a snapshot of like, oh, that's what they do well. And here's how they inconsistently did it moving forward. Then you'll start becoming more aware of like, oh, right, that's why that's so successful. Or I talk about like, oh, what is it? What do you have in deficit? And how can we cater it so that it feels natural to you, but not necessarily because it felt natural to Jim Lee? Because that's where the bridge, that delta gets, the divide happens. Wait a second, I understand how that foreshortening works for Jim because he's already kind of had years of how to do the shorthand for it, but I don't even understand how to apply that to what I do. So we start talking about that. And I think that's why I'm like, oh, I know how to do that for people. Because I never leverage my knowledge of how I do things and say, do it like this and it'll be successful. That doesn't make any sense. There's too much sort of information built in, like, there's too much sort of, how do you say, like, there's too many things to take for granted in that piece of advice on how to draw. Rather, I'd go like, oh, I saw you do it here. Do that more, and here's why you're doing it and why it's successful.
Right.
Absolutely.
There's that shorthand or that knowledge that's in the back of someone's mind who's been doing this for 20 years, and that they don't necessarily know how to communicate that. And the other thing about picking up the learn to draw like Jim Lee is then you look and it's like, okay, well there are 173 lessons here of how to draw like Jim Lee. I'm going to start at lesson number 1, and that people look at that and seeing the hill that they have to climb, is very, 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 what's the word I'm looking for? Daunting, yeah, but like discouraging, very discouraging. Yeah. Because
well, it also, pardon me, but it comes back to one of our original topics was what defines success. When you were saying things like, what is this passion? Should I go for it? Should I have a fear of failure? Blah, blah, blah. Well, you need to define what your success is. Yes. If the Jim Lee drawing is your end goal, then fantastic. Yeah. If you are trying to say that I want to quit my job to draw like Jim Lee, but you've never taken an art class, I'm not going to say no, but I'm saying there's a very good chance you're going to fail if you're trying to financially support yourself.
Yes.
If you're going to try to financially support yourself as an artist, having never taken an art class, maybe now's not the time to leave the day job. But that's between you and your finances. Sure. Maybe you're a trust fund kid. I don't know. Yeah. But once you take the steps and you build up enough confidence and also enough wisdom to know what you don't know, and then fill those gaps, there comes that point where you're willing to like grab one and grab this one and then shift over, and then you can let go. Yeah. But you got to find where that gap is for the individual. Yeah. Well, but the other thing to remember is, when in doubt, just put wings on it, and it looks better.
There you go.
Every character looks better with wings. Every artwork looks better with wings. Everything. Just slap wings on it, you have a better product.
Have wings, so
we're good with it.
Well, oh my God! Take any picture. Draw me Spider-Man right now. He looks all cool. Give him wings. Like, oh, he looks so much better. Wings makes everything look better. Sorry.
Or if you don't know how to draw that thing, put it in shadow. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how to draw that. I'm gonna cover it up with something.
Find it on Google Images, throw a lot of filters over it, and you know what? You drew the thing. There you go.
Don't do that.
Hey, you just do my entire art style. Shut up.
So one thing
Mine
that
too.
I really wanted to kind of point out, because I know a lot of people are like, well, I don't have the background, I don't have the training, I don't have the experience, and therefore I'm never going to make it. And so that leads me to a story that I feel compelled to tell. I have a brother who
Good story.
Yep.
is a
Strong.
multimillionaire.
Oh wow.
He has several companies that he started from the ground up. And it's all in trucking and waste management and recycling and things like that. For anyone who thinks, oh, he must have really, been, gung-ho about all this kind of stuff and everything. He was a high school dropout. I think he got his GED, but I'm not really sure. He basically, the reason that he succeeded in this is because if somebody told him that he wasn't going to make it, that he couldn't do something, his number one goal was to prove them wrong. And so when he stopped going to high school and, he'd walk in the front door and go out the back and everything, my mom was trying to get it through to him, like, all these fancy cars that you want, this everything, if you don't get your high school education, that's never going to happen. And he basically told my mom to hold his beer. And that's where he is now. He is, barely into his 50s, and he's about to retire, selling off his company, and has a cabin, a house, a pool, I don't even know how many fucking cars. Like, it's insane what he did. And he did it simply because he wasn't going to accept failure as an option. He did it because he wanted to succeed and he wanted to prove people wrong. And so if you're sitting here saying, well, there's other people who do this better than I do, there's also people who do it far worse than you ever could.
But are already doing it.
And
Yeah.
they're doing it, and they're getting paid for it. So just let that shit sink in, okay? You have people that do this shit that know far less than you do that are still doing it.
That
so
goes
there's
back to
no
what you
reason.
said an episode or two ago. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's no reason that you shouldn't pick up the mantle and try.
Right.
All right. Are we ready to wrap this
We are.
up?
Gibbs says he has one more thing, no?
No.
Gibbs got
I don't have
scenarios.
not full blown scenarios like before. I'm much more truncated.
Okay.
Would you
I'm ready,
rather's?
Would you rather's? Oh my gosh, look at Sai.
Let's go.
Sai is prepared.
Let's do it.
All right. So okay, who wants to go first?
I'll do it.
Eric.
No one's actually looking at their screens. This is hilarious.
Who would like to go first?
I'll go.
Eric.
Oh, gee. Eric wants to go. Eric, pick a number between 1 and 78.
3.
Number between 1 and 78. Number 3. Fantastic. Scroll back up. Okay, 3. Would you rather have spaghetti for hair or sweat mayonnaise?
Oh, spaghetti for hair. Easy.
Yeah.
You have
Well,
no
I-
hair.
Yeah. No, but spaghetti for hair, I'll never go hungry. Like, I need a haircut today.
That's
Yes.
fair.
Easy
That's
peasy.
fair.
That's an easy choice.
All right,
right,
Sai,
cool.
you're up.
I'm up. Oh, 13.
13. All right. Would you rather only be able to watch one show for the rest of your life or only watch the first episode of other shows for the rest of your life? The same show indefinitely. You can only watch that same show, all seasons, everything, from now to the end of time, or from now on, you can only watch the first episode of a show and that's it.
One show.
One show.
Yes.
Just for the shits and giggles, what is it? I mean, Deep Space? Babylon?
Probably one of the tracks. Babylon's
Okay.
a good idea, but probably one of the tracks. I'm usually pretty good about finding new facets every time I rewatch something, which is why I rewatch things so much.
Okay, fair enough. Shae,
You said up to 78, right?
1 through 78.
77.
Oh,
77. All right. Scroll back down.
I odd for no reason.
Okay. This apropos. Would you rather know how you're going to die or how your significant other is going to die?
Oh, hell, neither. Oh, okay, if I have to know one. Significant other.
Okay.
Because if I know how I'm gonna die, then I'm gonna spend the rest of my life trying to avoid that thing, and it's
Good point.
like I feel like quality of
wait.
life, I'm going to end up as a hermit. If I know how the significant other is going to die, there's a chance I might be able to put it out of my head.
No, you wouldn't put it out of your head. I know exactly what you'd do. You'd wrap me
would
in
be in
bubble
bubble
wrap and
Yeah.
That's fine. I can protect you from it. I can
Dead
save
by
you from
squirrels? This is weird.
We're
Guess
never
moving.
going where squirrels are again.
there are no squirrels
Then a
on
freak
the moon.
squirrel truck accident falls out of the sky. That's what you just didn't know. You went to Arizona where there's no squirrels.
Yeah. Yep. And then all the squirrels just fell out of a
Right.
cargo hold or something.
Right, they're airlifting squirrels or something.
Exactly. No, I could see
The
her
genie
wrapping
got
me
me.
in bubble wrap, and then you died of asphyxiation.
All right, I'll
from
do
bubble
one.
wrap.
Someone
Yes.
pick one for me.
22.
Oh, that's a good.
22. Let me see. 22. What do we got here? Would I rather go out without deodorant the day you meet your celebrity crush, or run into them after you just rolled out of bed? Ooh. Just when I rolled out of bed. It's an honest thing. I believe that all dates should go this way. The first date, however you want to do it. The next date, immediately the next morning, do not brush your teeth. You're only allowed to pee. That's it. You show up in your pajamas with your eye crusties, makeup all messy, hair jacked up. Because they see you at your best, and then they see you at your worst, and the rest of your relationships be somewhere in between. So
That's valid.
Is that
I like it.
how you got your wife, Kip?
I met her in high school, and
So
afterwards
yes.
we
Best and worst.
yeah. She knew me at my worst, but like we were friends. She dated somebody. Long story short, after my first divorce, only one. After my divorce, my first wife, I found out she lived 5 miles from me. Went out to dinner, and then the rest was history. It was like, oh my god, it was just like perfect. Like, so
That's so sweet.
it is sweet.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for watching another episode of Writing Prose. This was a really, really good one. I really like this topic.
Yeah.
And I definitely
Thanks,
think
Eric.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
insight.
Thanks, Sigmund's daughter.
Yes, thank you.
And there will be a brief showing on screen of the graphic that you all can see in your
Yes.
DM
Yeah, they're all going to show up. Don't worry about it.
of Eric's original Instagram posts. So.
But
Yeah.
I do want to thank everybody for watching. Please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to Red Valkyrie. If you have a piece of writing that you would like the panel to review, we are going to attempt to do these quarterly. If we ever get submissions, send it to
Or your art, I'll critique it.
Yeah, sure. We'll critique all of it. It's fine. redvalkyrie.writingprose@gmail.com. You can also send any requests for topics there, or just reply as comments in the video. And we'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Hey.
Later.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Writing Prose. Please like, share, and subscribe if you've enjoyed our content. You can also become a channel member or shop our merch store to support us. We're currently accepting fan-submitted stories for anonymous on-air review later in the season. Send your submissions to redvalkyrie.writingprose@gmail.com. We'll see you next time.